Hi, we're in Yost Park in Edmonds. It's 48 acres. It's kind of in the middle of a residential area on one side, and on the other side it borders Main Street, which is one of the main thoroughfares leading into the city. In the early 1900s it was logged, and from the clear-cut area red alders built up. It's a mixed forest. We've got some cedar, and we've got some big leaf maples, and we've got some hemlock and red alder. So it's got a big diversity of bird life here. On this tour I tend to stick with places where people who might have a mobility issue can still go. It has wide lanes and not a lot of real steep hills. So it's a nice place to go if you maybe have a wheelchair, or maybe have a walker, or maybe just don't like hills. I'm hoping today we might see some of the baby barred owls. I'm not going to promise anything, but we can take a look, and I usually start my tours on the main service road, which is around the corner. So you can follow me. You can hear a pileated down there. He's down in the ravine. It's got that deet 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 deet, and then it stops abruptly. A flicker will do the whack-a whack a whack a whack, and it kind of fades off. Whereas the pileated stops, it's like it cuts off. Someone slams the door on it. And that's what I'm hearing down there. That. Here's a nice little brown creeper. They're pretty interesting little birds. They have a long curved bill, and they work their way up a trunk and then fly to the base of another tree and work their way up the trunk there. And this is a really good place to find them. They're also a species that nests here. So if we're lucky, sometimes we'll find recently fledged young. So that's pretty neat. This is the west end of the service road, and it's flat, it's easily accessible, it's wide, and it affords you a beautiful view of the ravine. It gives you a great view of a lot of mid canopy and canopy top birds. What you're hearing in the background behind us is a song sparrow, and they're pretty neat, especially for new birders. The saying goes, if a little sparrow lets you get a good look at it, it's a song sparrow, and that's usually the truth. We're going to continue heading east on the access road. It passes the pool, and on the other side of this chain link fence where the ravine goes down, it's a really great place for kinglets, and we get both kinds, ruby crowned and golden crowned kinglets. It's kind of a neat place. If you're looking for them, that would be where you'd want to check first. And again, the big leaf maples, they're great for all sorts of warblers. These alders are great for warblers. Lots of robins, and this is a really neat place starting in fall and working all the way through spring for varied thrush. So if you're looking for a varied thrush, this is a great park to come to and look for them. One of my favorites that I've only seen a couple times, but I hear quite often, are the red-breasted nuthatches. And they're the ones that sound like they have little tin horns, and they say yank, yank, yank. You can hear them throughout the park. This is kind of where my favorite part of the main service road starts. It's when you can really start to get a good look into the ravine. It's just a real varied habitat. Especially in the spring, this area just comes alive with little birds. We've got some pretty cool stuff here. I've seen black-headed grosbeak here. I've seen vireos, two kinds. I've seen Wilson's warblers. I've seen yellow warblers. I've heard and never seen common yellow throats. Robins, varied thrush, Steller's jays, pileated woodpeckers, flickers, northern flickers, red-breasted sapsuckers. Just so much here. I thought I heard a flycatcher, and I thought it was maybe a willow. Those are the ones that go Fitzbew, Fitzbew. And I thought I heard one, and they're usually like on top of a snag. They're kind of a hard one because they're always so high. I'm looking at a dot silhouetted against the sky. We're about a third to halfway down the path now. This is nice because there's lots of room. It's also a good place if you're a birder in place, is you can bring a chair and sit here, and it's called a big sit, and you can sit here and see what comes to you. I was standing here And I heard this interesting call, and I looked out, and there was a black-throated gray warbler, and it flew right to a branch right next to me, and I had my camera with me, and I got the best ever photograph of it. It was just beautiful. And that was right here on the other side of this railing. This particular park is in the process of change. When it was logged in the early 1900s, the red alders grew up out of it, but they won't reproduce here. These red alders are at the end of their lifespan, which is anywhere from 30 to 100 years. There are a lot of snags here, different sizes, different trees. A snag is a tree that has died, and it's the part of the tree that's still sticking out of the ground. As it rots, insects move in and help the decay process, and birds use that. They can use it as food. The wood becomes soft enough to where birds can drill in and make nests. If it's a shingled tree, brown creepers like to nest underneath a piece of bark that's peeled up, and that's pretty awesome to see. Pileatids, downies, surprisingly, chickadees will nest in a snag. They drill holes and make little holes for them. Snags are great. If you've got to have a tree cut down on your property, say, leave me the snag. This park is also a wonderful place if you're interested in hummingbirds. They nest here, and pretty much all the regulars who walk here, you know, 2 or 3 times a week, by the end of May have found a few hummingbird nests. And hummingbirds build these little tiny nests. They use lichen and they use spider webs, and they're little tiny things, and they each hummingbird, the female, lays 2 little tiny eggs. And so there's 2 babies in each nest, and they fledge after about 28 days. We start looking for the hummingbirds when the salmonberries bloom. Every spring when they bloom, they show up, and the male shows up first, and he's the brightly colored with the gorget, and he's the loud one, and he's doing the J's in the air and popping and being noisy and all. He's all about that. Meanwhile, he has a number of ladies who have gone about and they've made their own nest, and he just stands around and crows about how great he is, and all the little female hummingbirds make their nests. They lay their eggs, they feed the babies. They do 100% of the work, while the guy sings about, I am the greatest. We're about 1/3 to maybe 3/4 along the path now, heading eastward. And this clearing right here is usually where, if we're looking for them, we can find the black-headed grosbeaks. And you usually hear them before you see them. They're way in the top of the canopy. They sound like a robin, but they're fast, they stutter. So if you hear some drunken robin up in the treetops, look up top and you can probably find them. Black head, orange-yellow bodies, very pretty little birds. I'm looking for owls. You looking for the owls? They're here?
Yep. And it's that lower.
I see them, okay. Yeah. There are 2 babies this year. They recently fledged, and they're out there. We can hear them hissing sometimes. The parent still feeds them. They're out of the nest and they're flying around, but they hang together, and they do this thing. If you can find them, they show each other their feet. So they're very funny, and usually you can find them because the crows are mobbing them. They fly silently, so you can't hear them fly. At this point, they're still pretty fluffy. Okay, so that was pretty special. We got to see the barred owl. That was a real treat. We were hoping we'd get to see them. This is at the far eastern part of the park. There's a small, gently downward trail that's fairly easy. So let's take a look and see what's down there. There's a seasonal creek here. Shell Creek runs for most of the year, but this little offshoot is pretty seasonal. I come down here with a friend at dusk sometimes, and we hear a lot about the dawn chorus when birds early in the morning wake up and start singing and calling. There's also an eventide chorus, and it's really nice to be down here and hear it. It gets pretty loud. And it's just such a pretty area to be in. I tell people, if you're going to start birding, actually the best time to start birding is in the fall when the leaves start falling. And it's so much easier to see the birds in the trees because you're looking for dots in the branches. A little harder during this lush early summer part. This little grove of western red cedar is where I often see red-breasted sapsuckers. For some reason they seem to like this little area. I wonder if they don't have a nest somewhere around here, but for a few years now, if I see them in the park, it tends to be right around here. A bird just flew in there. What is it? Oh, it's a robin, an American robin, a male. The males have the dark, almost black head, and the females will have a brown or gray head. Oh, and he's got some of those salmon berries. There he goes. So he's bringing salmon berries. He got a mouthful. I wonder if he's not feeding some young. We're coming down into the ravine on the gentle path that leads down. We've just crossed the creek. Here's the salmon berries that I was talking about that come into bloom and bring in the hummingbirds. We were here once in whatever this plant is. I'm not sure what this little tree is. And there was a little downy woodpecker who was trying to hang on the branches. He was really trying to work his way up them, but it's just too springy and little for him. But he was a pretty cute little guy. Little male downy. Something in there. The bush chits do nest in here. I've seen their nest. Looks like a hanging sock. Okay, this alder snag here that has the bark peeling off it, where it peels off from the bottom, that is where brown creepers have nested. They climb up underneath, it's like a shingle. They go underneath it, and that's where they nest, and that's where they have their babies. This little four-way intersection right here is usually where we end our ADA tour. There are other paths that we can continue on, but we usually find that we've been gone an hour already by then. Plus there's a bench to sit on if you kind of need a rest before you start back. Also a bench just to sit on, to just sit and wait for the birds to come. Lots of snags, lots of action around this area, and lots of places, different directions to go if you want to continue.